going to be looking at Databricks. And one of the exciting things about all this is that we are Databricks partners. So we get to have access to different modules, different training stuff and all that good stuff that we can take advantage of to be able to understand this platform better. All right, so with that, we'll get started. And we will start with our first slide here. If you can be willing to cooperate with me. So this one here, I just wanted you to have a mental picture of this. This is the Databricks data intelligence platform. We'll look at it in details, and this is actually what entails what I am going to be talking about today, and kind of piecing these pieces together so that we can have a better understanding of what Databricks does, what is Databricks, and all aspects of Databricks. All right, so our agenda today is going to be the introduction of Databricks, Databricks key features, some of the use cases that we can be able to use, the integrations, and then we'll have a demo. And then we'll look at the Lakehouse and what's Lakehouse and the Lakehouse architecture. All right, so a little bit about us before we can jump into Databricks. And I'm not going to go through this since everybody is aware of what we do, where we are, and all that good stuff. But I wanted to highlight the very bottom of this slide where we are vendor agnostic. And what that means is that we are not tied to any vendor. That allows us to be able to give our customers the best solutions for the best, for the right money. So we are not tied to any of these platforms, despite the fact that we are partners. Our first and initial goal is actually our customers. So hence the reason why we look at all these platforms so that we can be able to provide the best that there is for the solutions. All right, so let's, without further ado, let's get to what Databricks is and all that good stuff. So it's a cloud platform, and I wanted to highlight the keyword platform there. That's why I have it in bold, because there's a lot of pieces that come together to make up Databricks. So it's a cloud platform for managing and analyzing large data sets. So over time, we've seen solutions that are usually based off on-prem, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. When it comes to big data, the on-prem solution that we've had for some time, beyond now your like PDW, which is parallel data warehousing, which was Microsoft's solution for on-prem, but we've had solutions like, for instance, Hadoop, which is the almost like a competing product of Databricks. But the key difference between Databricks and Hadoop is that Databricks is in cloud, but they both use what we call Apache Spark, and there's some other components and some other components that actually make up this platform here. So it uses Apache Spark, which is an open source for big data processing engine. And then we also end up with experience-based, where we have, like, for instance, a workspace for data scientists, the engineers, the business analysts, where you can be able to unify those workspaces and they can be able to work together. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a moment. Then we have the ability to collaborate, and we've seen this now with most of these products that are actually cloud-based, that are driving the big data processing. This is one of the key components that it has to have, where we can be able to collaborate, develop, and deploy data-driven applications. So Databricks does this very well. Then it has a lot of integrated tools. So this is where you're able to do your data preparation, you're able to do your real-time analysis, you're able to do your machine learning, you're able to do your artificial intelligence. All this, there's a lot of integration that's coming in, and we'll look at that as well. And especially when we get to the Lakehouse architecture, that allows us to be able to see how Databricks actually integrates some of these tools together, so that you can be able to have a full, complete platform that allows you to make this analysis and be able to do your data preparation much quicker. It does support various data types. Now, one of the common data types that we are are working with now, especially when it comes to big data, is what we call packet files or packet deltas. So this is one of the files that actually, it's a very highly compressed file. So this is one of the files that actually has that support, but there's a lot of files that we have the ability to bring into Databricks, and we'll look at that, which is actually very exciting. To sum it all up, on introduction for Databricks, it's a unified analytical platform for building, deploying, sharing, and maintaining enterprise-grade data and analytical and AI solutions at scale. So what I mean by that is you're able to, like, for instance, build clusters. You're able to destroy clusters based on how much data you want to bring on board. You have the capability to be able to scale your environment to process a lot of data and be able, once that processing is done, you're able to scale it back down so that you can be able to save on cost. And the platform does offer us the process, the store, the share, ability to analyze, model, and also monetize data sets. So you have that, you're bringing your data set where you can be able to process it, you can be able to store it, you can be able to share it, and a little bit about that concept there. It's all now coming in. Why that is important is if you look at our traditional way that we've been able to do these data ingestions or large data set processing, the big data that is, we had the traditional data warehousing. Then there's things that traditional data warehousing does not do, which is why we kind of went away from it, and then we went to the modern data warehousing, which included what we call a data lake. I know that's a term that we've all been familiar with, the data lake, but there's things that data lake doesn't do. That's why we are transforming now to what we call a lakehouse. And one of the key pieces about those, the data lake and the lakehouse, is the ability to store the data. So having the ability to store data to reduces that process of ETLing, which is extraction, transformation, and loading of data from your source or from different aspects of the platform, which can end up being very expensive. So that's one of the cool things about Databricks, because you have the ability to store this data and you have the ability to analyze the data, share this data all within the platform, and then of course be able to monetize that so that you can be able to either drive your business or be able to serve up what's requested by your end users as far as the data is concerned. Some of the key features that we do have in Databricks, of course, we talked about the whole Spark, Apache Spark. So you have Spark in the cloud, which allows us to be able to process big data. And then it's a very secure cloud. We have a secure cloud storage. That's another key feature there. And we've seen this again across a lot of products that we do work with here at Hamley. We do see that where the security is a big major piece whenever we are recommending these platforms to our customers, because you don't want to be in a situation where data is compromised. Then the other thing about Databricks is that it's a ACID transaction. We do get the ACID transactions via Delta Lake integration. And what ACID transactions means is that you have the acronym, it's actually an acronym. So the ACID, which is atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Yes, and durability. And what that means is that when we are working with a transaction, it's either the transaction goes all the way through, so the transaction completes fully. So if think of it like now, for instance, you're banking, you're transferring funds from your savings account to your checking account. You don't want to be in a situation where you have you start the transaction and you're doing your transfer, and then midway something happens and you end up with whatever money that you've transferred from your savings to your checking. That amount is now in your checking, whereas the same figure is still in your savings. You want to make sure that that transaction is complete. it goes all the way through, or if it doesn't go all the way through, it rolls back all the way back. So that's where the ACID transactions comes in. So you want to make sure that it's atomicity, it's very consistent, it's isolatable, and then it's durable. So that's where all that. And then when we're talking about the Delta Lake integration, this is actually one of key pieces that we do have in Databricks, which is an open source storage framework that does enable us to be able to build agnostic Lakehouse architectures. And we'll look at that much further in just a moment. Then the other cool thing about Databricks is that we have what we call a Unity catalog. This is where you do have all your metadata. So you're able to manage all your metadata, and we'll see that in just a demo in just a moment. You have the ability to manage all your metadata within the platform. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just having the ability to scale and descale the environment. So that cluster management ability, that's also another cool feature that we have the ability to add more clusters if we need to have much more firepower for our environment, so that we can process much larger data set. And then once we are done with that processing, then we go ahead and scale back down. So you're able to manage that cluster, those cluster resources, which pretty much means just adding more resources or adding more servers per se. And if I lean back a little bit on Hadoop, that was one of the cool features that we could be able to do with Hadoop, because Hadoop gave us very cheap storage. So we could be able to add machines to the environment at in a very easy way, and then be able to destroy these nodes if we do not need them again. And the node machines, that's all the same thing. And then the other cool thing that we have now in Databricks is what we call a Photon query engine. So this is a new feature that they do have, which allows us to have transparent query acceleration, so that you have it's actually pretty much just a plug and play. So you can be able to turn it on, and then it will take the queries, or it will take whatever queries you're running within your environment, and it will be able to accelerate them. Now, what that does is, when you have these accelerated queries, you're actually saving money, because you're not taking as much time to process queries, so you're not using as much resources. So think of it like, now we have our cluster, and we've added, let's say, 5 more nodes, so that we can be able to transform this data, or we can be able to ingest this data. And then out of that 5 more nodes that we brought in, it ends up taking another 5-6 hours. So that cluster resources that we've brought in, we are paying for it. So if we can be able to accelerate the way we are doing our data transformation, then that reduces the amount of time. That we're processing that data. Hence, me not needing the 5 hours that I have that cluster. So that one of the cool features that we do have on Databricks. And then notebooks. We're very much familiar with notebooks and workspaces, which is where we can be able to write our code, be able to share our code, be able to collaborate, be able to do all that thing together, so that you have multiple people that are actually engaged in doing the development. So you're not having to, like, a single skill, a resource, if I can speak this morning, a resource, so that you can be able to complete the work. So that's another cool thing that we do have there. And then, of course, like any other platform, we have our admin control, and then our automation tools that does allow us to be able to automate like, for instance, schedule jobs, be able to even the cluster management, be able to spin up cluster managers, clusters, and be able to destroy clusters. So those are some of the automation tools that we do have in Databricks. And you can always interrupt me if there's any questions. Any questions so far? Right. So if there's no questions, we're going to proceed. So some of the use cases that we do have with Databricks, and this is pretty common when it comes to data platforms that we're trying to feed off, so that we can be able to provide our end users or our customers with the ability to work with the data, be able to make decisions out of the data. These are some of the common use cases that you're going to find in market. So first one being an enterprise data lake. So what does that, and I keep on referring here to data lakes, which I think we will be able to do a session about entirely what's a data lake and what's the genesis of data lake. But what this does, the data lake here, is you have the ability to bring the enterprise data warehouse, and then you bring in the lake, the actual data lake, and then with that we have the birth of Lakehouse. So I needed to correct that. It was enterprise data lakehouse, not data lake. So you're bringing in your data warehouse, your enterprise data warehouse, and then you're bringing in your data lake. When you marry them together, you end up with a lakehouse, which is a much better model, or the much better architecture for us to be able to process these large data sets. And when we talk about large data sets, we're not just talking about the text or the structured data. So the data that now we're dealing with, like for instance, this recording that we do have here, this is part of the data. We can be able to ingest this data and be able to do analytics on this data. You have the videos, you have the voice notes, you have unstructured data, the XML, the logs and all that. So you have a lot of data that's now we are dealing with as organizations, where we could not be able to do that previously. And that was one of the failures that we had with the traditional data warehouse, because that one we depended a lot on structured data, where we knew this is a column and a row. And then, yes, we had semi-structured data where we could be able to ingest, like for instance, an XML file, where we know this node is here, this wording is here, and so forth and so on. But now with the data that we are receiving, which is now a lot of video analytics, a lot of audio analytics, all that becomes now data that actually helps us be able to make decisions. So this is one of the key use cases that we do have with Databricks data lakehouse, because we can be able to bring that data in now and actually be able to ingest it and be able to do analysis on it. So that's one of the cool things. The other thing that we do have is the data warehousing and analytics BI, which is common. Again, you utilize that environment. Once you bring that data in, you're able to analyze it and then be able to feed it off to your whatever your data visualization tool could be. It could be your Power BI, it could be your Tableau, it could be your Looker, it can be whatever your visualization tool is. So you have the ability to do all that. And then the other cool thing about Databricks is the UI itself is very user-friendly, and I'll show you guys that here in just a little bit. So that whole concept of data warehousing becomes much easier when we do this from Databricks perspective. And then our ETL and data engineering. So that's another piece there that we do have. As I mentioned at the beginning of our call, we are utilizing Apache Spark. That's actually what we use. And Apache Spark has the ability to process that large data set. So now when you bring in your Delta Lake, then the custom tools, that does allow us to be able to ingest the data. Then we have now that complete ETL processing platform. What we will see here in just a little bit when we get to the demo part is that ETL process, there's some pieces of it that are native to Databricks, like now, for instance, the Delta Live Tables. And what Delta Live Tables is actually a framework that does allow us to be able to build, and then it does allow us to be able to build and maintain more of a testable data pipelines. And this is now when you get into, like, for instance, streaming data. Streaming data is the data that's coming in consistently. But when you're doing what we call more of a batch processing, now at that point from the ETL perspective, and batch processing is where I say that I want this data at this time. So my data is coming on intervals. That's what a batch is. So at that point, we kind of depend on some of the partners, and we'll look at that as well. That does allow us to be able to do that ETL process and data engineering. Then you have your machine learning and AI, and of course the data science. And in Databricks, that piece there, we refer to it, actually just got renamed not too long ago. I think maybe, let me not put dates to it, but now the machine learning and the AI platform in Databricks, we actually refer to it as Mosaic AI, which does allow us now to be able to bring in like libraries, for instance, the ML flow. You have the ability to do large language models, which we are very familiar with here from our organization perspective, because we're doing a lot of AI pieces. You're able to do Gen AI. So these are some of the key pieces that actually Databricks does allow you to be able to do. Then, of course, data governance. So this is where now we can be able to bring in that data. We can be able, and this is where the Unity catalog comes into picture, where you can be able to get that metadata of the data. You can be able to determine what type of data do you have. Then you can also be able to define who has access to what data, because that's one of the cool pieces about Databricks is I can give permissions to a specific role so that my data, whatever I have in my Databricks, is not open to everyone. So I have the ability to control who I can be able to give permissions to. And we'll also look at that in just a moment. And then, as I was mentioning with the Delta Live tables there, ability to bring in near real time or streaming analytics. So this is the data that's coming in consistently. You have the ability to ingest that data. So think of it from like IoT devices, or if you have if you're in a medical facility and you have sensors, we want to be able to determine if the fridge is cooling as expected. Is it at the right temperature? So that's streaming data, because you don't want that. You can't receive that data in batches, where, let's say, for instance, we receive it every hour, knowing that the devices that are inside that refrigeration system can compromise lives. So you want that data to keep on coming, so that you can be able to analyze it, be able to see if there is any outliers, be able to see if there's anything that could be wrong with the machine. I was trying to figure out the right wording there, with the machines and such. So yes, so you want to have that ability to have this streaming data that's coming in consistently and near real time. You're going to also hear from you're going to also hear about real time for me and the experience that we do have, and there's really nothing like real time because being able to capture that data as it happens, it's not. There still has to be that process of streaming it. There still has to be that process of data movement. So it's not like real time. So I think from these platforms, you're going to hear the wording of real time, but it's good to always annotate that it's near real time. Any questions on use cases? I have the best audience this morning. No questions. All right. So the next thing that we are going to look at here is the actual Databricks integration. So one of the cool things about Databricks is that the platform itself, it's not a platform that stands by itself, right? So it has to live in a cloud. And the major clouds that we do have Databricks in is AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So whether you're a customer that is very well integrated with AWS, you can absolutely be able to do Databricks. If your cloud is Azure, if you're all Microsoft, and AWS is the Azure, not Azure, but Amazon Web Services. So this is the Amazon cloud, the Azure, which is Microsoft's. If your stuff is in Microsoft's cloud, if that's the architecture, or if that's a model that the business is working with, Databricks has the ability to sit on that, and there's already that integration, and we'll look at that in just a moment. If you're on GCP, which is the Google Cloud, similar situation, you have Databricks sitting there. And the cool thing about all this is that no matter which cloud you're in, whether it's AWS, Azure, or GCP, the architecture is the same. It's just the tools that you use, which are native to the cloud that you're in, and we'll also look at that in just a moment. All right, so when you're doing these key pieces, when you're determining which integration to do with this, of course, you want to look at it from data warehousing perspective, because you want to be able to do that continuous integration, continuous development, which is the CD, so continuous integration, continuous development. So you want to be able to understand based on the tools that you use. If you're using AWS, if you're using Azure for your, let's say, like for us, we are heavy Azure shop. So a lot of tools that we do use, they are actually Azure based, which is like, for instance, the DevOps, which does allow us to be able to do that CI/CD. If it's like, for instance, the GitHub and so forth. So these are some of the integrations that we do use on our side. So it kind of dictate based on the tools that we have in-house and the expertise that we have in-house. It makes it easier for us to make that determination on which cloud that we want to be able to deploy our Databricks on. Even though we do have folks that do AWS, but most of our pieces that we do work with, they are actually all Azure-based or Microsoft-based. So it becomes a much easier thought process on where we are going to be able to place our Databricks in. So when you're making those determinations, so where you have your data warehousing or where you want your data warehousing to sit, which tools you're using to do data integration, which, like, for instance, as I was mentioning, the CI/CD, what you're using there to do that continuous integration, continuous development. The messaging platform, if you're using Kafka, if you're using, let's say, Service Bus in Microsoft, if you're using Google, I think Google is Pub and Sub. I think that's what they use for their messaging. So all these tools, whatever you're familiar with, makes it easier. So data orchestration, how you want, and this is how you bring the data in. In our case here, if we are on Azure platform, our data orchestration, of course, it's going to be Azure Data Factory. If you're on AWS, I believe they use Kinesis. I think so. They use Kinesis. And then if you're on Google Cloud, I'm not certain which one Google uses from data orchestration perspective. But the other cool thing about it is that you're not limited to whatever that cloud also offers, because there are some tools that are in market today that actually specialize in these data orchestrations. And one of them that we're very familiar with here is Fivetran. So Fivetran does allow us to be able to move that data back and forth. So that's a data orchestration tool that is not native to a cloud, or it's not native to one of these three cloud vendors here, that you can still be able to use to be able to orchestrate that data. So even though you go ahead and implement your environment in AWS, if you don't want to use the Amazon data pipelines for you to be able to do that data orchestration, yes, and Kinesis is your messaging, the Amazon data pipelines. Let me do that correction there. Amazon data pipelines is the way that you do that data orchestration, which is almost similar to Azure Data Factory. So if you don't want to be able to use either Amazon data pipelines, or if you don't want to use Azure Data Factory and you want to integrate it with Fivetran, you can absolutely be able to do that. So that whole concept, it's all being driven by which cloud you're much more familiar with. So your RDBMS, which is your relational data management system, your storage and storage transfer, whatever you're using for your storage transfer and your storage, if you're using Azure Cloud, or if you're using AWS Cloud, if you're using Google Cloud, and again, all those, they're all pretty much the same. It's just the cost that kind of you have to make that determination. So yes, so from integration perspective, Databricks sits on the three major clouds that you do have out there. So what you have to make determination in to be able to determine where your cloud sits, it's all based off it's all based on the familiarity that you do have with either of this. Any questions on that? Right. So when you get started, so Databricks actually offers us two tiers of And I'm going to look at this now more. As I mentioned, we are mostly a Microsoft shop. I can talk today. We have Microsoft shop. So I'm going to be looking at this mostly from Azure perspective. But again, whatever you have from either of these cloud, it's almost similar. And we'll see that here later on in just a few minutes here. So from Azure perspective, you get two tiers. So you have your Databricks as a standard tier. And then you have what we call an enterprise, a premium tier. So the standard tier here, you can see some of the cool things that you can be able to do is the all-purpose compute, and then you can do your job compute, then you can do your job light compute, which is the automated workloads using APIs or UI. So that's a light part of it. So these are some of the key features. This one you're going to have. So if you're going to implement Databricks, these ones you're going to have, because you can only be able to do one or the other tier. Now, looking at all this, these are just your common stuff. You're able to do your notebooks, you're able to do your integrations, you're able to do your deltas, your ML flow, which allows you to be able to do machine learning, autopilot and such. You're able to do that, autopilot clusters, by the way. You're able to do all that. But now, if you want a little bit more, this is now where we go to the premium tier. And the key pieces that you get with the premium tier that I want to highlight here is, like, for instance, the conditional authentication. Remember what I had mentioned earlier, where you have the ability to define who has access to what. So now from security perspective, you're getting much more with the premium tier. You also have the ability to manage your tokens. So again, this is the when you're doing the token management, this is where I'm defining how APIs are able to pull the data. If I want to do the integration with the APIs, I'm able to define how that data is actually being transferred or how that data is being pulled. So if I want to do much more security management of my data, again, the very first one that we do have there, which is the role-based access control for notebooks. So you want to go to the premium tier. But if what we have here suffices, where we don't have to predefine who has access to what notebook, and we can all be able to work as a community within our organization, then absolutely the standard tier will be able to work. So those are the two key pieces that we do get from Databricks, which is the premium tier and the standard tier. And think of it from premium tier is when I want to actually apply a lot more security to the data or security to the components that I do have in Databricks. That makes it easier for my users. All right, any questions so far? Yeah, as I mentioned, for us here, we are a Microsoft shop, even though we do a little bit of AWS just here and there. So I am actually going to look at this platform from Azure perspective, and it's very easy to get going. So getting it going is a piece of cake, but we'll look at that in just a moment. So to get going with Azure Databricks, so what you will need to do is get started with the Azure Databricks here, and you can be able to go ahead and create an environment. If I go through this, I'll be able to define what subscription I want my Databricks to be in. I'm able to define what resource group I want to be in, and all these resource groups is actually things that we've created internally. So everything that we do see here is actually built by our team. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my dev environment there. Then we can define this here. I don't need spaces. And then I define which region I want to have my environment running in. This is always ideal because not all regions are built the same way. So make sure that you, the key concept with when you're building these pieces here, especially in Azure, is to make sure that your data is as close to your users as possible. So in our case, we want to be in South Central, US. So we have South Central. That's why we want, because that's where we are based in Dallas. So we want to make sure that we are as close as possible. And then this is the premium tier that I was talking about. So remember pricing tier that I was talking about. So remember I mentioned we have two. So you have your standard, you have your premium, and then you have your trial, which gives you about 14 days of trial. So we can go with either, but this is where you define what tier you want your environment to go with. And then if you want to go ahead and name your managed resource groups, so we can just call this one Databricks. And then you can go ahead and step through. So again, there's really nothing to this. So this is the encryption. If we want to go ahead and do the encryption, if we want to do the security compliance, if we want to add any tags so that we can be able to, that this is just our Azure feature so that we can be able to find our resources where they are. And then you do your review and create. Once you do your review and create, what we end up with is actually now my Databricks, like what I have here. And I'm going to go ahead with our dev environment. So that brings us to this page here. And then I can go ahead and launch our workspace. And as you can see there, it's much easier for you to even go ahead and do the upgrade. So if I go ahead and launch my workspace, now here you are actually working with Databricks. So to go ahead and do the authentication, and as you can see there, it's a single sign-on. And here you are. This is our environment here. So this is actually now me in Databricks. So I'm going to walk through what we have here so that you can be able to understand the pieces that we do have. So the first piece that we do have is the workspace, and you can have, it's worth mentioning that we can create multiple workspaces. So you can have like your finance workspace, you can have like your, if you want your offshore, onshore workspaces, you can be able to do all that. So you can be able to create different workspaces, but remember the workspace is actually being driven when I create that environment. So from workspace perspective, I have the ability to create a repos. And what repos are, this is how we do our data storage. So not really data storage, but our code storage. So we have like integration with Git, integration with DevOps. So you have the ability to do those integrations. And here we are, like for instance, I created this Demo Tuesday folder here. So now I can go ahead, if you look on my far right here, I can be able to create a Git, which is the recommended route. So this actually integrates now with GitHub, so that now GitHub becomes our code repository tool. So again, that's in Microsoft ecosystem perspective, and we'll talk about that in other platforms in just a moment. So I have the ability to go ahead and integrate that. So of course, I'll provide the GitHub or the Git now. I think we go by Git now. URL, and then I provide any other required information so that I can be able to authenticate. And now based on that, now I have the ability to store my code and be able to share my code, be able to collaborate on my code. And we'll, as we go through this platform over time, I'll be able to show you guys all these pieces here. Then whatever is shared, I can be able to see what's shared with me, the users that we do have in the platform. So at the moment, I only have myself. But yes, we have the ability to have other users, and we can be able to absolutely create other users. So that's one of the cool pieces that we do have there. Then you have this, which is a legacy repository. So it does request that we go ahead and use Git, but if you have a legacy code repository, you can absolutely be able to use it. So, but you see also what just happened is because I created that folder called Demo Tuesday, I have that capability to see it down here as well. And of course, you can be able to do your favorites. As you go through this process, you can be able to favorite some items that makes it easy. If, let's say, for instance, it's a notebook, you can be able to favorite one or multiple, whichever one that you're working with most often, so that you don't have to go through a lot of them. And again, as we go through this platform over time, I'll be able to show all that. Then you have trash here. Which is if, let's say, for instance, something like a notebook has been deleted, you can be able to go to trash and be able to recover it. It's worth noting that items in trash, they are automatically cleaned after a month, after 30 days. So you wanna, if it's something that's has been in trash for over 30 days, then once it gets purged, you have no way of recovering it again. So it's worth noting that that trash bin there, whatever items that we are going to be having here, whatever we delete, notebook or whatever, or folders and whatever, we can be able to recover them up to 30 days. So that's important to note. And this is where we'll be able to get to it, which is all within the workspace. Then we have our recent. So this is the items that I've worked with recently. So at the moment, we're just establishing this one here for this specific demo. But again, we're going to look at this platform as we go, how you bring in the data, how you work with data within Databricks and such. Then we talked about the Unity catalog. So this is where all that happens. So again, easy access of items. It's as I mentioned earlier, it's a very user-friendly UI that does allow you to be able to see what you have out there. So this is where you're going to be able to see the metadata that we do have for different platforms or different for different assets that we do have. So this is where you're going to see all that. And you can see we have, like, for instance, the serverless stuff and all that. And then you have your workflows. In the workflows, this is again where you have, like, for instance, I talked about the Delta Live. We can be able to go ahead and be able to create pipelines. This allows us to be able to bring in that streaming data. Job runs, we can be able to create job runs. So again, these are jobs that will allow us to be able to see the processing of the data or what's going on within the pipeline perspective, be able to initiate batch processes and such. That's where all this is coming into picture. So jobs and job runs. So that's where that is. And then we talked about the clustering process. This is actually where that compute is. So I can come here and be able to create a new compute. So I can create a cluster, be able to define how I want my cluster to look like based on the resources that I'm able to, based on the resources that I do need. And I can be able to define all that, how many minimum workers I need, maximum workers I need, drive type I need, all that good stuff. And then you see up here, we have Photon, not Proton, Photon, that you can actually be able to enable so that we can be able to, again, be able to process this data much quicker. So that allows us to be able to do that. So this is where the compute is coming in, personal compute. And we will go, again, once we get to this platform where we are beyond the introduction, we'll be able to see all this. Then you have your query editor that does allow you to be able to do your queries. So this is where you can be able to do your SQL scripts, your select statements and such. You have the ability to do that here. So again, very user-friendly platform. I can be able to do be able to see my queries here, be able to create queries, be able to share those queries, be able to see the dashboard of what we have out there. So as far as the like, for instance, our servers that we do have there that we've created, we are able to see that all here. So this is where that dashboard comes in. If there's any alerts, that are going on, let's say, for instance, we are over the specified resources or the time that we want, that one we can all be able to see here. And I can be able to also create my own alerts if I needed to create my own alerts that will trigger based on specific event. Then, of course, the query history that keeps track of what I am doing here. Then you have your SQL warehouse. And what you'll notice with the SQL warehouse is that it actually takes me back to compute. So that's one of the key pieces there to notice. And you see that a lot with this platform here. There's some pieces that we're going to look at, and you see that it will take us back to what we have here. So here I have my SQL warehouse where I can be able to create my serverless warehouse. So I can be able to create a new one. I can be able to start what I have here and what have you. So that's where that was coming in. And then you can see up here we have our jobs. So all purpose, our job compute, our pools, policies, if we want to drive based on policies, our apps and all that good stuff. So we have the ability to see all that. Job runs will take us back to workflows. So that's actually taking us back here. Data ingestion will take us back to, okay, let me hold on to that. I will talk about that here in just a moment. Delta views, that takes us back to workflows as well. So if you notice the job run, this is just taking us back to this tab that we have in the workflow. And then our Delta live tables, that takes us back here for our streaming data. Now, remember what we talked about integration, and I'm not going to dwell a lot on machine learning features here. I think this one will be ideal once we start getting into the actual platform itself. Then I'll come back and I will be able to show you all this. So remember what we were talking about, the ability to bring in data, and bringing in that data, we have partners. This is where this comes into picture. So you will notice here that this one here now, I can come and search. Let's say, for instance, I want to go ahead and bring data from on-prem SQL Server. So if I go down here, I should be able to see, and you can see we have a lot of connectors. I can be able to bring data from Amazon S3. I can be able to bring data from Oracle Cloud. I can be able to bring data from Postgres, all this. I can be able to bring data from an on-prem SQL Server. So, but here's a key thing. If I do this and I go ahead and establish this, you'll notice that my middle tier here is actually Fivetran, right? So my source is SQL Server. My middle tier, which is my ETL tool, is Fivetran, and then we have Databricks. And then it makes it so much easier that the only thing that I need to do here is just sign in. Even if you don't have an existing system or you don't have an existing account with Fivetran, this integration makes it so much easier, where I just go ahead and sign in and it automatically establishes a connection with Fivetran. And now my Fivetran becomes my ETL tool. Right? So that's a key important feature there. So going back over here, if I go all the way back here, you will notice this is Fivetran connectors. So you have the ability to bring, this is where now we were talking about the partners. You have the ability to bring data with the partners. Now, if you want to do this with Azure Data Factory, the ADF, you can be able to establish that. You're not going to be able to establish it here directly. I don't think you can be able to, let's see. Data Factory, yeah, you cannot be able to establish it here directly. But if you have Azure Data Factory, you can be able, and again, that's piece of Azure platform. If we want to review that, I can absolutely be able to take you guys through that. But this one's here is the partners that we do have from Fivetran perspective, the files. And I think the other one is the legacy product, where we can be able to upload the DBFS files. So that's the other cool things. So if you want to use the native Azure platform tools, then all you need to do is just go back to your Azure platform and be able to use your Azure Data Factory, which is this guy here. So can be able to use Azure Data Factory and you'll be able to ingest the data. So there's no limitation on that as well. All right, so that's that. And then the other cool thing is the marketplace. This is always fun to talk about. This is where I can go get all kind of data. So I get data that I can be able to play with. And of course, you can be able to highlight that you want free data. So the marketplace does give us data that we can be able to ingest, be able to bring in on board and be able to play with. But last but not least, on this platform here, this is my most exciting piece, is the partner connectors. Because the partner connectors here, we have some of the amazing core tools that you can be able to bring in. And yes, you can be able to determine which one you want to use. So we, as I mentioned, we are Tableau and Microsoft Shop. We do both. So we can be able to actually integrate now, be able to tap into the data that we have in Databricks using using Power BI and be able to create those visualizations. If it's Tableau, we can be able to do the same thing. So it makes it so much easier. And our Eric in-house with the Click, we have the ability to be able to do that as well. And of course, our Eric and Dominic, DBT, that's another tool there that we actually used heavily for us to be able to do data preparation. And then there's a piece for everyone. If I scroll further down, where are you? For Edgar and Martin, where did you go? Let's go to our machine learning. That's actually not what I want. I want the AI. That's not what I want. I can find it now. But you have also the ability to bring the Hugging Face. If you guys have not heard of Hugging Face, that's one of the coolest AI models that there is in the market at the moment. They have a lot that you can be able to do with. I don't know why I'm not seeing them here. That's interesting because I know they are one of the partners that it does integrate very well with. So you have the ability to bring that in as well to be able to visualize that. And because of time, I'm going to go ahead and kind of run a little bit faster. So that's a platform, unless there's any question. So if there's no question, I wanted to go back here, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this. So this is the Lakehouse. I think we'll come back and do an actual session on Lakehouse and how Lakehouse fits in all these platforms. But you have your source, you have your data ingestion, and from your source perspective, you have this here unstructured data, semi-structured, structured, and your RDBMS. You have the ability to do your ingestion where you're doing your event streaming, you're doing your event loader and what have you. You have your orchestration process where you do your transformation, your query processing, your SAP, which is where your data warehouse comes into picture, and the analysis piece where you can be able to connect with different AI tools. But what I wanted to show after that is now this is from Azure perspective. So if we're looking at this platform, the Databricks data lake perspective from Azure perspective, what you will notice is that here I have Microsoft tools, the Synapse, the SQL Server, same thing with the batch and streaming. We have our Azure Event Hub. We have our IoT, all that coming in from Microsoft perspective. Same thing with Cosmos DB. This is now when we serve the data, when we create that data warehouse, we can be able to do our Cosmos DB, your SQL DB, you can be able to do all that. But notice that this structure in between kind of stays the same, other than now bringing in these other tools that we do have here. If I look at this from AWS, notice again, this structure in between stays the same. The key pieces that does change is our storage, what we use for batch and streaming. Here this is just your RDBMS database, which in this case we're coming in from Redshift. If we come here, we have our Amazon RDS and then the DynamoDB. That's the other piece there. And then the BI tools from Microsoft perspective, from AWS perspective, which is the Amazon Quick Insights. So that's the platform does not change other than the tools that you're using. Similar situation with GCP. So again, BigQuery using storage transfer, using Pub and Sub. That's the way that we get the streaming data in there. Our storage now changes from either Amazon or SQL or Microsoft to Google Cloud, and then the operation. And then, of course, your BI tools becomes your Looker. So this structure for the Databricks, again, stays the same. And we'll talk about the Lakehouse here in a little bit so that you guys can be able to see the full extent of it, how we're doing that medallion architecture and all that. So that's what I have. And yes, the next topic that's loading is the Lakehouse platform, which we will look into details. And with that, I have lines open for questions. We're gonna have an amazing audience today. It's either I am so on point. Go ahead, Martin.
Hi, everyone. This is Christian.
I can hear you. Go ahead and raise your voice a little bit.
This is my question.
Go for it.
Okay. Since the Databricks seems can do data ingestion and data engineering, including the ML and also the analytics and the BI part. When you're using the Databricks, do you need the Microsoft Fabric if you are using the Databricks as your platform?
That's a great question. So actually, one piece that I did not show here that I needed to show that will answer that question. I don't have that slide, interesting enough. So Microsoft Fabric is actually a competing product of Databricks. So you have Snowflake, you have there's a few that are there. Your question, yes, Microsoft Fabric is a competing product of Databricks. So yes, you don't, depending on which direction you go, they both serve the same purpose. So you just have to analyze and determine which one fits best within your platform and, of course, the cost. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
Fivetran and Databricks, different entities. I know they integrate, seems like they integrate together, but are they different entities?
Yes. So Fivetran, and my experience with Fivetran is there could be more, but what I know Fivetran for is an ETL tool that does allow us to be able to ingest data, it's that your extraction, transformation, and loading, or your extraction, loading, and transformation tool. So it does sit in between. Your data source, depending on what your data source is. If you're doing streaming data, then, and I'll go back a little bit here on my slides. If you're doing streaming data, in this case, so you have your event streaming. So whatever you're doing your event streaming here, Databricks does have its own capability to do that streaming data. But if you're doing that batch processing here, which is where we see, like, for instance, ADF, Azure Data Factory here. So instead of Azure Data Factory or whichever other tool that you're using, this could be Fivetran, that is. So yes, it's more in this architecture here is more of ETL tool.
Okay.
So a good question, follow-up question on that, Eric, that's important for us to note is that other than the streaming directly to Databricks, Databricks does not natively have a ETL tool.
Okay.
That's good to note. So that's why we have to depend on the partners, like, for instance, Azure Data Factory and Fivetran, for us to be able to bring in that batch data.
Okay. So as an organization, I would be concerned. Well, one of the things just to note is that data may be traveling through tools and not just one org, but tools owned by. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where we talk about the Lakehouse and some of the advantages that we do get with the Lakehouse, which we'll talk about that architecture from ETL perspective.
Okay.